To get a good idea of what goes into building tables and end tables and console tables like that, that's the back of that one. Um, what a better understanding of what goes into it is more than just going to the store and buying the wood. Um, this right here is the bottom of an end table that I'm building. These are all pocket hole screws. This is the bottom where they all piece together. This is never seen. But anyway, all this has to be done with the pocket hole jig there. But the first thing is, after I buy the wood and deliver it here to my house, bring it to my house. These are, if you ever been to Lowe's or Home Depot, you see how boards are. Sometimes they're rough, and there's a lot of work has to be done to prep a board. Uh, First off, you cut all the pieces to size the tabletops, and after you cut all the pieces the size, there's a lot of the scrap left over from this table I'm building now. They have to go through a planer, which will even out all the boards, and it gets some of the twist out of the boards. It makes all the boards the same size, because some of these boards like this right here, these are 2x6x8s, but a lot of times there may be a difference in the gap, a difference in the height of a board. Sometimes these boards are actually a little bit thicker than the other boards they're laying in the same part of the shelf with it. So I run it through the planer there to get them all the same size, so they'll avoid this area here from being there's a lift right there. I gotta get that one fixed. But that avoids all the lifts in the wood there. And then after that's done, in order for these things to fit tight together like this, the factory edges are never straight and even. They always got a little bit of they got a lip on them. They got a little bit of a gap sometimes. So what you do is you run them through this joiner here. This blade here on the joiner will cut that lip out, and it makes it an even fit to where to match up like this and like the top over there. That's actually 3 of these boards that I'm showing you right here. And then after I get them in place, sometimes I'll run a router around it and wrap the edges of them. But before all that's done, that's probably one of the closest to the last steps. I bring them over here to my sander, and all the wood has to be sanded down to make it smooth. This is part of the other tabletop. I'm missing 2, but I get 2 more boards. But so in order, you see the crack out, it fits real good right there because of the joiner. But in order to make this stuff really smooth, I have to sand it first. I sand it twice. I sand it with 60 grit, which takes all the rough part off of it, even after it's been through the planer, to smooth that out. And then I run 120 grit over it to give it another smoother finish. I do that after I piece it all together. This has been on the flip side of this has already been sanded with 120 grit, well, with 60 grit sandpaper. You see how rough it looks. But what I do again is I'll run the sander over it with 120 grit, and it'll be a lot smoother and cleaner looking. And this is all going to be stained, a Jacob Bean dark stain anyway. But after all that's done, the tables, all these holes are drilled one by one with the jig there, not the gig, the jig. And then I'll bring them over here. And the reason why I'm talking about the miter saw cuts is all these are level. And then sometimes, if this is a 24 by 24 tabletop, so in order to make it 24 by 24, sometimes you have to trim down a piece to make it fit, to make it 24. And of course, it's done on the table saw, so that's ripped down to make it fit that. So after all those boards are glued and jointed together, I'll flip it over. I'll sand it with the 120 grit sandpaper, make it a little smoother, and then the tops are usually the second part of what I do. These are the frames are going on. I built these probably in 2.5 hours yesterday on a Saturday, 2.5 hours. Got the X's cut, got each board singled out. These are also planed, and these are also miter cut, and they're also jointed on the joiner to make the edges fit together good. That has to be done. That's also sanded with a 60 grit, and then it's 120 grit after that. All this wood is done the same way, and of course I have to piece the X's. I have to caulk the cracks. I have to miter cut the X's to make them fit. Caulk the cracks. This will be stained Jacob Bean. The top will be stained Jacob Bean. and the frame will be white. So that, and then after the top's made, I don't attach it yet. So what I do is I'm missing the board on the second one. I got to go back and get another board. But after the tops are made, I set them aside. I go ahead and prime the part I'm going to paint white. I go ahead and prime it with Kilt's primer, one coat, and then I'll go ahead and paint it 2 coats of white. I put 2 coats on it, and that would be the X in the frame. And then the bottom, the next section has to be done is pre-stain that goes on the wood. Here is a pre-stain, comes in a red can from Lowe's. That has to be put on, and then after that's dry, then the stain itself has to be put on. 1 coat of the stain, then I sand it with 120 grit sandpaper real lightly, just to get because sometimes the stain will bring the bits of the wood up. You sort of just sand it down to get the roughness off a little bit, make it smooth, and then I put 3 more coats of stain on these parts I'm staining. But that's done. That's part of the process for the bottom of that one and this top over here, and this one right here. This has got 2 coats on it now of stain. Well, it's got 2 coats of stain. It's got 3 coats of polyurethane on it to give it the shine and the protection. Between each coat, it has to be sanded with a 220 grit sandpaper real lightly to get the grit off of it. And then I'm gonna go back and I'll go back and put at least 2 more coats of polyurethane on it, and then that'd be like a total of 4 or 5 coats. So then this piece will be finished here. It just took me about a week to build, but so all this that's part of what goes into building these things. It's not just a snap together model. The wood doesn't come already cut for you. The X's aren't already made for you. That's why I tell a lot of people that it takes a little while to build these things. It's not a quick thing, but there's a lot that goes into the woodworking besides just getting the wood from the store and nailing and screwing it together. You've got pre-drilling, you've got pocket holes, you got these X's to size and cut at angles on the miter saw. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, into building these items, and that's where a lot of the price of the quotes are figured in, as far as the time and labor to build them. Not just the material itself, but the time and the time and labor it takes to actually do all these steps. Even with the cutting, the sanding, the joining down, the staining and the painting, and this was what takes the longest, because the paint and stain can be done pretty much in a few hours. 2 coats of white paint with the Kilts first, the primer first. The stain, you have to wait. Once you stain it the first time, you have to wait at least 24 hours for it to dry before you can go back, and if you want to put another second coat of stain on there, or if you want to go ahead and put the polyurethane first coat on there, it has to sit for 24 hours. So to get it fully dry. So that's what the longest process of most of the builds, of the smaller builds. The longest process is the staining and painting part, mainly the stain, because this thing's been built probably for a few days, finished with the hardware and everything on it. This has taken me 3 more days to do, as far as the staining and preparing it and putting the final coat on it. So that's what a lot more goes into woodworking than just buying the wood and snapping it together and throwing it together. There's a lot of preparation that has to be done. Like I said, these boards never come in the store this smooth and this straight and cut this good. That's never like that. One of the processes of going to the store, I sit there and pick out pieces of wood. It takes me several minutes just to make sure I give it the straight test. I give it to make sure it's not warped. Look down the edges. I'll take a piece and I'll aim it just like this and look down the edges to make sure it's straight. Make sure it's straight this way. A lot of times, these 8-foot pieces or 6-foot pieces, whatever I'm using, I'll actually lay them on the floor at Lowe's, on the concrete floor, because their floor is supposed to be level, and make sure it has no wobble in it. That's another test. Make sure it has no wobble. I'll lay it on the floor itself. So